Mr Ian Murray.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. And it's a great privilege to follow the honourable lady from Witham. We sit on the Foreign Affairs Committee together and agree on very much that the Foreign Affairs Committee does. I'm afraid to say we agree on nothing with regards to Brexit, and we have those battles within the committee. But it's very unfortunate that we've been left here this evening with a set of amendments from the group of Conservative rebels that want to take us off a cliff edge. That's what these are designed to do. And we have had unconfirmed reports that the government may accept these amendments. I don't know if the Minister from the Treasury front bench would nod to say that he is going to accept them. But if he does, I hope he's got a match or a cigarette lighter in his pocket, because he'd be just as well to set alight the Chequers agreement in terms of what the consequences for these amendments would be. And on top of all of that, we have the former Secretary for exiting the European Union, who is back in his place, who must be now regretting leaving the government, given that he threatened to resign 5 times, has eventually gone through with a resignation on the Chequers agreement that's just about to be ripped up by his own front bench to a much more hardline position to take us off a cliff edge in terms of a hard Brexit. If he'd only stayed on a few more days, he may have been able to see through the proposals that he started. I'm happy to give way to the right honourable gentleman, given that I've mentioned them.
Justice Helen, nearly everything in his sentence he said was untrue.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that it is untrue, and he would have resigned regardless, but surely there's some regret. Well, maybe actually we should be glad that he resigned, given that he stood up in this chamber as a former Secretary of State and managed to persuade the House, or try and persuade the House, that Operation Stack was something that was positive for the country in terms of having trucks and lorries queued up at our ports. I've never known a Secretary of State to look at a tragedy in terms of what might have happened to our economy had Operation Stack continued for much, much longer, and turn it into something positive. And if that's the kind of argument he's going to give the country, and indeed this House, we should be making sure we vote down most of these particular amendments. I just find it extraordinary that, having gone through all this process, and these debates seem to me a little bit like déjà vu, that we have arguments about the customs union, about the single market, and we are still here, a week away from this Parliament proroguing for the summer recess. The government have managed to botch together what is now called the Chequers Agreement, and within a week has completely torn it apart by pandering again, as the right honourable gentleman for Rushcliffe says, to 30 or 40 people on the hard right of the Conservative Party, who would be much more honest just to stand up and say that they want the cliff edge hard Brexit, rather than putting amendments down to this bill that is driving a coach and horses through the agreement that the government have managed to come together on. I'm happy to give way.
Would the honourable gentleman really be proposing that the 163 independent members of the WTO are somehow teetering on a cliff edge, or doing something rather odd, or are they just simply normal trading nations trading with each other freely? Because I find this cliff edge statement rather peculiar, because it doesn't treat the facts.
Well, I'll tell you who's teetering on the cliff edge. It's the 10 or 12,000 people in my constituency work in the financial services sector that are teetering on the cliff edge. It's the advice and analysis we've had from his own government's Treasury, who says that even by staying in the customs union and the single market is the least worst option for this country, and to go down the WTO rules that he suggests in his intervention that we go round leaves this country teetering on the edge of a GDP reduction of somewhere between 9 and 16%, depending on which part of the country you live in. If that's the kind of positive argument for taking us out of the European Union, then I think the country needs to be given a people's vote in terms of that, if that's the kind of attitude that people want in terms of whether or not we're going down the right track. And I think that's why the honourable lady for Brostow's brought new Clause 1, and indeed she didn't really mention new Clause 12, but I think that in terms of a customs union gives us a platform that could unite the vast majority of this House. And I agree with the right honourable gentleman from Rushcliffe. When the division bell rings on new Clause 36 and Amendment 73 tonight, we should all go down the lobby against them to show up how many people are actually in this House that want to protect the future prosperity of this country, or want to take away any future prosperity for their own narrow ideological needs. And I do say this to my own front bench, that I do hope that when the division bell goes on these amendments, we do vote against them, and we do make a stand against what these hardline right-wing Brexiteers are trying to do to our country, because there is absolutely no way you can achieve what the government wants us to try and achieve of frictionless trade while putting in place a set of policies that put hurdles on that particular trade. There is no VAT alignment with these particular amendments. If you have no VAT alignment, you have no backstop. If you have no backstop, you have no withdrawal agreement. If you have no withdrawal agreement, you have to have a hard border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. And if that's the aspiration of some of these amendments, then there has to be a long, hard look when we look back in the future to the way we're just about to put the single largest element of self-harm ever into this country about what people are actually trying to achieve here. And I think the Honourable Lady from Broxtow's introductory remarks when moving New Clause 1 sums this up. She was attacked by her own party in what were pretty disgraceful remarks from some of her own party, when she is merely trying to put forward the argument to save this country from doing economic damage to itself. What a remarkable thing to happen when the arguments are just trying to come forward in terms of what we are trying to achieve. So we've got here in front of us two bills, the bill this evening and the bill tomorrow. Merely the government has to put in place, if they look at New Clause 12, to keep the customs union and the single market on the negotiating table. New Clause 12 doesn't say to implement it, it merely says to keep it on the negotiating table. And that's what I think would be in the best interest of this country. And I say to the Minister, and I agree with the Honourable Member from Broxtow, the Minister is one of the best ministers in government. I disagree with the vast majority of things that he does, but he's courteous, he's intelligent, he always answers questions in the best way he possibly can. And he can't be sitting there this evening. He can honestly be sitting there this evening, ready to accept these 4 amendments, thinking that it's in the best interest of not only the country, but of on the Chequers agreement that the Prime Minister's managed to cobble together last Friday. It's time we need people to stand up on that front bench with a bit of backbone for the interests of this country. And by the time we go into the division lobby, very late on Tuesday night, when the customs bill that we've got in front of us here and the trade bill tomorrow are passed in this House, the front bench can either say that they've stood up to the hard right of this country and stopped economic Armageddon, or they can say they've done the right thing.